Everyone, my name is Aaron Tuckfield. I'm the Vice Chair of the Planning Commission, and at 6:30 p.m. I'm calling this regularly scheduled meeting to order. Our first item on the agenda was the call to order, and the second item is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would stand with me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, that takes us on to item 3, which is roll call. Mr. Bentley, please call the roll.
I will. Mr. Hardy has an excused absence. Mr. Tuckfield.
Here.
Mr. Marley.
Here.
Ms. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Spatafora.
Here.
Mr. Oliver. Here. Mr. Bentley. Here. All present.
All right, very good. That leaves us with a quorum. I'd entertain a motion to exclude Mr. Hardy from all roll call votes.
So moved. And I'll
By Mr.
support.
Spatafora, supported by Mr. Marley. All those in favor, please
Aye.
signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. That motion passes. Takes us on to item 4, which is the approval of the previous meeting minutes. That would be the minutes for our November 12th meeting last week. Is there any motions or discussion on the minutes?
Mr. Chair, if there's no motion regarding that, I'll make the motion to approve.
All right, motion by Ms. Smith. Is there support?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Oliver. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. That item passes, and the minutes from our last meeting are adopted. Takes us on to the approval of tonight's agenda. Is there any motions or discussion on the agenda this evening?
Mr. Chair, if there's nothing to add or to our agenda for this evening, I'll make the motion to approve.
All right, motion by Mrs. Smith. Is there support?
Second.
Supported by Mr. Spatafora. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. That motion carries, and the agenda is adopted. That moves us on to item 6A, which is old business, site plan and special land use for the one-stop party shop on permanent parcel 08312260007. I believe Janan Kakos is the petitioner. Mr. Box, could you please take us through this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. As you see here, this is located at 21 and Garfield on the southwest corner. I think you've all seen this site before. They were actually recently in for a variance request as well, a couple variance requests actually. So I'll walk you through that, but they are seeking this evening a site plan and special land use approval. So I'm going to walk through first the special land use findings. They are associated with the outdoor sales, things like ice, propane, wood bundles. So what they are seeking is to have those, what you quite often see outside of a gas station or a convenience store, kind of on the sidewalk area. So the criteria for the special land use, as you're all aware, that they're in location, size, and character with the development in the surrounding neighborhood. And staff sees with the commercial across the street and the existing commercial plaza that it is already there, it is in compliance with that, that it's such a nature that it doesn't affect vehicular or pedestrian traffic. It does not impact those items. That the use shall be designed with respect to location, size, and intensity. So this is pretty standard for a convenience store, gas station. That the proposed location and height of the buildings and structures, the nature, the height of the wall and fences. So outdoor sales are a common supplemental use to gas stations. It doesn't really impact the height of the building or anything like that. So we don't anticipate that it's going to interfere or discourage any other development in the area. The proposed use shall relate harmoniously with the physical and economic aspects of adjacent land uses. Again, there's commercial on 2 other corners at this intersection, as well as there's already commercial at this location. So it is harmonious with that. Necessary for public convenience at the proposed location. It's not really an applicable criteria. And that the proposed use is designed, located, planned to be operated in a manner that public health, safety, and welfare will be protected, and we do feel that that is the case here. And then that the proposed use shall not be detrimental or injurious to the neighborhood. Again, there's a lot of commercial in the area. There's nothing out of the ordinary with this request for a gas station location. So staff at this time is recommending approval of the special land use portion. With regards to the site plan, again, they did come in for a couple variances, one of which was some setback reductions that request was denied. So they are actually proposing to remove a portion of the building and fit the gas pumps on what would be the east side of the building along Gratiot. They are meeting all the minimum setbacks. They do propose a monument sign that meets the ordinance, and the trash enclosure that meets the ordinance as well. They are 5-foot sidewalks along both road. Actually, I believe that's 8-foot sidewalks. I think that's a typo there. They're 8-foot sidewalks along Garfield and 21 Mile, and they are showing that as well as the 2 access drives. And to note, the southern access drive, the one on Garfield, is 29.6 feet when 30 feet is required. That was a variance that they got granted, so that is in accordance with their granted variance. They have 17 parking spaces as well as 8 pump spaces required, and they're providing 24 spaces and 8 pump spaces as well. They do also have loading zones with applicable dimensions that meet the ordinance, and they have provided landscaping and screening around the site. All the lawn areas will be sodded and irrigated as required, and the plant list accurately corresponds with the drawings. These were in your packet, but these are the elevations that were submitted. Again, nothing within these. They're within the height requirements, and nothing in here would violate the ordinance. They also provided the photometric plan showing where the lights would be. They're all angled down and shielded as required by ordinance. And at this time, staff is recommending approval of this site plan along with the special land use.
All right, thank you, Mr. Box. Is there any questions for Mr. Box from the board? Go ahead, Mr. Spatafora.
Yes, Mr. Box, the elevations that were included in our packet, they look like they're switched around or reversed, where the east elevation looks like it's west and north is south. Can take at least in our packet with the drawings,
Elevations of the buildings.
elevations of the buildings. It's looks like sheet A20, where it says the south being the front elevation, that given the space and the past variances and the parking there, that looks like that's the north. And what is proposed to be the west as the left elevation, that looks to be the east. I would think that is what would be facing the gas pumps.
I think you're correct. I think they're reversed.
Okay, just where the east should be on the west side towards,
Yes. Yes.
the drain, and what's
So
north.
where it says
should be
north
south.
back, that's actually the south, and,
Okay.
and south front is actually the north. Yep.
And are you and staff comfortable with the variances and the revisions that were made as far as the pumps being a safe distance away from, which would be Garfield Road?
Yes, they meet the ordinance. The reduction in the setback for the pumps previously was denied, so what they're providing tonight does meet the ordinance.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Mr. Bentley.
I had several, just clarifications. Let me get to them. Where do we have the representative here?
We do. I apologize. I'm going into ZBA mode where I typically ask for questions from the planning director and then go to the applicant. I will ask them if you would prefer to wait. I was gonna ask them up next.
Well, one of the questions I had is where do they envision the detention area that the engineering department identified was needed? That was one question. And is this a single-phase construction project?
Well, Mr. Bentley, let's just check. Is there anybody else with questions for Mr. Box?
No.
If no, then I'll call, if the applicant could come up. Mr. Bentley, let's have them give their comments, and then maybe they'll answer some of those, and we can go to
Gotcha.
questions after that.
Thank you.
If you gentlemen and ladies could give any comments you have, your names and addresses, and yeah, any other comments you have.
My name is Ghassan Abdul from JV and Associates.
Hang on just a second, sir. I think our microphones. Try again. Let's see if it'll go through.
My name is Ghassan Abdul from JV and Associates, the architect of the project.
Okay.
Is it working now?
I think so, but I'm waiting for confirmation from the back. I'm not hearing the typical echo. You good? Why don't you keep talking and she'll give me a thumbs up if it's coming through.
And I'm Jesse Parkinson with Green Tech Engineering.
Okay.
Still can't hear.
We're still not picking it up.
Is there a button to turn
I'm
on?
wondering if maybe we might have to move people to the.
You have a green light on there?
Yep, pushing it only mutes it, so you don't want to push it.
We may need to move you to the podium if our AB person is telling me. Are we good to have them there, or do you think we need to just move them proactively? Okay.
Oh, I'm like, I can hear them,
Yeah, I think unfortunately
It's
we have
not
to-
plugged in.
There we
That's
go. a
that's
different cord.
audio visual. That's not the.
Oh, okay.
Do you hear me? Yeah, that's good.
Yes. Yeah, that's going in there.
Yeah, so to answer your question regarding the underground and/or above-ground detention system.
Hey, Jim, it works now.
Jim plugged it in, so I think you were hearing the reverb when he plugged it in. So
Yeah, now we know why it was unplugged. Yep. Go ahead.
did you plug it back in, Jim? Is it still? Or you probably
No, it's
unplugged?
not.
He unplugged
It's
it.
out.
We'll handle it before we go to the next item. But if you could continue, and actually, sir, my apologies. If you could repeat your name and address for the record, because I don't think any of it actually went into the recording.
Yeah, no problem. Jesse Parkinson with Green Tech Engineering. We're the surveyors and engineers on the project. After speaking to Macomb County and the township engineer, we've discussed two different outlets for the detention. One being there's an existing catch basin and storm lead that goes from the existing parking lot east into the Garfield Road, west side of Garfield Road. We plan to use that as for a portion of the detention, and then the other portion would be to outlet into the glow drain to the west. We would provide both above ground, hopefully above ground, but maybe above ground and below ground detention and outlet into the drain.
So it's both, or it could be both above ground and below ground?
Yes, sir.
Because you can't just
Yes,
go into those particular.
You're right. There's a very shallow drain line that's on the west side of Garfield Road. We don't suspect that we'll get too much detention in that portion. Some of that existing parking lot drains to that catch basin, and we think we can handle that existing portion there, but the proposed portion, we're gonna have to come to the south and west and into the drain.
Do you feel you have enough room? Because there are flooding issues there now.
Yeah, there's enough depth to get an underground detention system at worst case scenario and then outlet into the drain. There's about 6 to 7 feet of depth.
Okay. I know this is not an engineering review or anything. You feel comfortable with that, Jim? That they have the room?
Yeah, those details will get worked out in engineering. If for some reason it affects their site plan, then they'll have to come back and revise their site plan.
Okay.
If you guys wanted to go ahead, I don't know if you had any comments in general on the project, but feel free to give any comments on the project in general.
I mean, thank you for having us here tonight. I mean, we did come here in front of you. We did get one variance, and we did actually cut the building like 14 feet, and we moved the pumps to Garfield side, and we took them out from the 21 side. We do meet the requirements for the 15 feet landscape setback, and actually we meet most of the requirements right now, and we're planning to kind of renovate the whole front of the building, with the building in general, and adding windows, fixing entrances and stuff like this, make it look like a new building. And we're looking forward to start doing the project, and we can answer any questions you have.
Very good. And sir, if you could also add your name and address. I know you gave it over there, but I just
Yeah,
wanna make
my
sure it's-
name is Ghassan Abdinou from GAV and Associates Architect. We're representing the owner of
Okay.
this project.
Very good. Thank you, sir. And my apologies for our technical issues. Not always fun to have those happen.
We'll get the other two names.
If they speak, I'll make sure we get them,
Okay.
but I think we're fine as long as
Great.
they haven't said anything. Any other questions for the petitioner from the board?
I had a quick question.
Go ahead, Mr. Oliver.
when you start this project, are you gonna shut your store down or continue to keep the store going?
Actually, let me answer. The way we're designing it, we're keeping the store running and we're doing all the work on one side. And after the construction is done on the site, we're gonna close it maybe for 3-4 months to put everything together and start the project again.
And while the store is running, are you gonna have adequate parking?
Yeah, most of the front we're not touching, so the parking will be in the front, so,
Thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'd take a motion to open it up to public comment.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Meyerly, is there support?
Support.
Supported by Mrs. Smith. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. That motion passes, and I'm opening up the public portion. If there is anybody who comes up, if you guys could step aside, we're gonna have to share that microphone. But at this time, if anybody wants to speak on this specific request, please come forward to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and give any comments that you might have. Also, please keep in mind that we have a 4-minute time limit on comments, and we typically don't answer any of the questions directly. We will take all of them, and then Mr. Box will answer any that we feel are pertinent to what we're looking at. That said, someone got up, so I thought we had somebody speaking, but I think they left. So without any objection, or actually, I'll take a motion to close the public portion.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Spatafora.
Support.
Support by Mr. Oliver. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. That motion carries, and the public portion is closed. Any other questions or discussion?
6:49.
Hearing none, I would entertain a motion. I believe we have to do these separately, Mr. Box, special land use request and site plan?
Yes,
And both of them are approvals, not recommendations, correct?
that's correct.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Bentley.
I did have one question for Mr. Box. Is there a requirement for any wall around this facility, around the property, the 6-foot? Generally, we have a 6-foot masonry wall.
I don't believe they have any adjacent property that's residential. They abut an office to the south, and I believe that the drain has some
To the
property to the east, or to the west, excuse me.
To the west? Okay. We have residents to the west, right?
But there's a drain there, and I think the drain office owns. If I can go back to the right slide here. So you can see this office complex actually owns all that drain easement. So they don't actually touch, the ordinance requirements is for a wall when you abut residential. They don't abut residential.
I see.
They're surrounded by the office.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, are there any motions?
Mr. Chairman, I will go ahead and make the motion to, we'll start with the site plan. Well, first we'll start with the special land use, since that was presented first. I'll make a motion to approve the special land use for One Step Party Store on the southwest corner of 21 Mile Road and Garfield Road in section 31, permanent parcel number 08-31-226-007, pursuant to the recommendation of our planning department. The department reviews the discussion here at the planning commission table, and as presented, further input from the petitioner and representatives.
Very good. Motion by Mr. Spatafora. Is there support?
Yeah, I'll support.
Supported by Mr. Meyerly. Mr. Bentley, actually, I should check. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion.
Mr. Tuckfield, if I could.
Go ahead,
I
Mr.
just
Box.
want to get this on the record before any votes. You all have at your seat a
I was going to
letter.
mention this before we went to the next one.
Yes, so I just want to make sure that these individuals are aware of this. You have been provided a letter from Kevin and Chris King.
Yeah, and we'll mention that also. I'll mention it briefly in a second. I was thinking that as well as we were going into it. Motion by Mr. Spatafora. Who seconded it?
I did.
Mr. Meyerly seconded it. With no other discussion, Mr. Bentley, please call the roll.
Yes. Mr. Spatafora?
Yes.
Mr. Marley?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hardy's gone. Mr. Bentley, yes, and Mr. Tuckfield.
Yes. All right, before we go on to another motion, I did just want to follow up with what Mr. Box mentioned, that we do have 2 letters on our desk this evening. I know that I read through both of them briefly before we came in with regards to, generally, I believe it was to the site plan, seen more than the special land use, but just a note for the record that we did receive those. Also, I had not asked one thing that I did want to clarify, Mr. Box, and that you mentioned the 8-foot sidewalks, that perhaps they were not marked as 8 foot on the drawing. Are you comfortable that the site plan we're approving will cover 8-foot sidewalks?
What's that?
5, they're staying at 5.
Oh, they're staying at 5. I apologize.
Okay, so they are remaining at 5. We were
Because they're existing.
Because it makes sense. Okay, very good. With that said, I would entertain a motion on the site plan.
Okay, also, I will go ahead and make the motion for a site plan approval for the one-step party store on the southwest corner, 21 Mile Road and Garfield Road in Section 31. Permanent parcel number 08-31-226-007 pursuant to discussion here at the Planning Commission table and is recommended by the Planning Department and the other department reviews, and with further input from the petitioner and their representatives as it meets the ordinance and revisions that were previously asked for and variance that was granted. And for those reasons, I do make that motion to approve.
Very good. Motion by Mr. Spatafora. Is there support?
Support.
Supported by Mrs. Smith. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, with the exception that our clerical staff is going to have a lot of ink to write that motion down, I would call for a roll call vote for Mr. Bentley. You might be rivaling one of my longer motions there, Mr. Spatafora.
Okay, Mr. Spatafora.
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Marley?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
Mr. Bentley, yes, and Mr. Tuckfield.
Yes. All right, that motion passes. Both of those items passed. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and we appreciate the work you guys put into it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, that moves us on to new business. Item 7A, conditional rezoning for the southeast corner of 22 and Garfield. That would be permanent parcels. There's a number of permanent parcels. I'm going to call out the first 8 digits of them, and then I will do the last 3 in succession to save us a little bit. 0829100, and then 001, 002, 003, and 019, 021, and 022. This is being put forward by a petitioner named Majid Koza. Hopefully I'm not butchering that name too far. And Mr. Box, if you could take us through this, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. The site is located at 22 Mile and Garfield Roads. It would be the southeast corner, as you see on the screen behind you and as you saw in your packet. They are requesting to enter into a conditional rezoning agreement for these properties from AG or agricultural to flex use. The intent of the flex use district is to create areas of convenient access for the daily consumer needs, jobs, and connection to the surrounding areas as it's written in our ordinance. So as you know, the conditional rezoning agreements, they provide conditions for us, and you as the Planning Commission will make a recommendation to the board whether you're in support of this or not in support of this. And the conditions that they have offered are as follow. The property shall be developed and used as a commercial development and will only be used for the permitted uses set forth on the attached Exhibit B, which I'll go over shortly. That the parcel splits and combinations shall be completed per all governmental requirements. The owner will install a 6-foot masonry wall abutting the surrounding residential properties, and the development will meet all other ordinance standards. That's a pretty standard condition that's in all these conditional rezoning agreements that you've seen before you. So essentially what that's saying is, unless it's called out by the first 3 conditions, then they will meet the ordinance with everything else. So with regards to Exhibit B, the uses that they are looking for, there's a pretty lengthy list here included. Hopefully you had time to go through that. I'm not going to read all of them, but it is a fairly lengthy list. There is no concept plan associated with this. I know Mr. Tuckfield asked about that this morning, going through his packet. None of the conditions reference any setbacks or anything that would affect a plan. So we felt it best that there's no need to have a concept plan with this one, because the only thing it really showed were some potential lot lines, and given that they don't have users lined up yet, those lot lines may move, and we don't want to have to come back here and amend this or revise this when they don't even have that yet. So they're only doing conditional rezoning based on the use of the property. Staff has looked at this, assessing, no objections. Public Works had no comments. Fire requests that they comply with IFC 2015. So planning did look at this, and we have a few comments. There is a large list. At this time, planning staff would generally be in support of just one drive-through rather than, I think they're offering two or suggesting two. So I wanted to point out, as you see on the screen there are two other highlighted in blue segments of this intersection, two other corners that have similar agreements already in place. Essentially, those two, the first one would be the northwest corner. That agreement was entered in with the township and the landowner. And then on the northeast corner, we basically modeled that conditional rezoning off the agreement that was entered on the northwest corner. We're basically doing the same thing here. What we've allowed on those two corners, we're saying we would allow on this corner as well. The only difference is that on the southeast corner, there's already residents adjacent to this. The other two corners, at the time of the agreements, the houses either were being constructed or didn't exist at all. So adjacent homeowners would essentially know what they're buying into if they did their due diligence. So that being said here, in general, I think staff is in support of this conditional rezoning agreement, but we would ask the Planning Commission to consider how many drive-through uses is appropriate, as well as one of the items on the list is for a car wash. It's a little bit noisier, and both of the two, I'll go back a slide, the other two corners at this intersection would not allow a car wash, where this one, if this agreement were approved, would. But again, in general, I think staff is in support of this agreement. We just ask that you consider those two items.
All right, thank you, Mr. Box. I will make sure that I hold with our Planning Commission standard for comments and ask if the petitioner is in the audience. If you are, please come forward to our podium over here. Give your name and address and any comments you might have. And it's possible, if you would prefer, that might be able to be lowered to a seated height. I don't know if you need it, but we can adjust that if it's necessary.
It's fine. Bob Kirk, 19500 Hall Road, Clinton Township, Michigan. With me is Louis Ciotti from Landmark Real Estate. Little unique here, and what we're asking for is a rezoning without any uses. The purpose is we're trying to assemble these properties. If they were to be developed singly, we'd have some real problems with regard to traffic circulation, access. The properties are zoned AG, which has traditionally been the township's placeholder until things develop. In this case, Garfield Road has come through. Our request is consistent with the master plan. And as I said, the assemblage of the property and the zoning allows us to properly develop the sites. It would allow for better circulation internally, access off of 22 and off of Garfield. With regard to Josh made a comment, the drive-throughs, we've eliminated a lot of the, I guess, objectionable type of uses, banquet halls, auto service centers. But with 6 acres, we think that's is plenty to sustain 2 drive-throughs. I think if you developed it separately, you'd be able to get more than 2. So we are requesting 2. The uses we requested mirror the properties on the north, so I think this is a good opportunity for the township to try to make a consistent corner here with all uses being fairly similar. That's all I have.
All right, very good. Any questions from the board?
One more thing, just so everyone knows, when we come in for uses, those will have to comply with your site plan ordinances and setbacks and engineering. So all we're asking for is a rezoning right now.
Very good, thank you.
If I may, like I said, Louis Ciotti, Landmark Commercial. The conversation of the drive-through / car wash conversation of 1 to 2, again, without any uses in play, was a car wash would then be potentially, if there is one, considered as a drive-through with one other traditional potential QSR drive-through if there's a building with an end cap drive-through of a shopping center of some kind. So it wouldn't be two separate voice box conversations, 24/7 windows, or anything like that. Just for the clarity on the car wash and the drive-through conversation.
Very good, thank you. And Mr. Box, do we consider a car wash a drive-through?
A car wash is a drive-through.
We do consider it, even though it's not a call box, as he's mentioning drive-through, but obviously
It's
a
not
car
nec-
stacking.
There may not be a call box, but there's still a drive-through.
Right, very good, thank you. Any questions from the board? So, Mr. Bentley.
So clarification on that, then if the car wash is a drive-through, is that the limitation, just that? There would be no opportunity for a call box for a fast food or anything else?
So, the way it's written,
drive-through.
the way it's written right now, I think they're requesting 2 drive-throughs. We're suggesting potentially limiting that to 1.
Yes.
If it were limited to 1, then yes, a car wash would be the one if that was developed.
Okay. I also had concerns on the exhibit. It's either Exhibit C or is it Exhibit B that provide the list of permitted uses. And according to the documents that we received, it's Exhibit B, not C, as was referenced in the letter. But anything, I believe 23, 24, 28, 29, 30, 32, I have concerns about those being in that location, so.
Mr. Bentley, if I could, what were the numbers on those that you were referencing?
I'm sorry, 23, 24, 28, 29, 30, and 32.
Thank you.
And I would concur with limiting to just one drive-through as well, and, yeah.
All right, very good. Any other questions, Mr. Looking at you and saying Charlie, Mr. Oliver,
Charlie,
sorry.
That's good. A question to Mr. Bach. So when we're talking about drive-through, one car wash would be you couldn't have a car wash in a fast food drive-through.
Well, again, it depends on how what they're proposing right now allows 2. So if this is recommended for approval, yes, they could have a fast food and they could have a car wash.
I see. So the fast food wouldn't be considered a drive-through?
It is, yes.
It is, but so, all right.
We're recommending that you consider limiting it to 1 instead of 2.
Yeah, I got it. Okay.
In which case, they could either do a fast food.
Correct.
Or a car wash, if the car wash element was allowed still on the list of uses.
Either or is
Yes.
basically what we're after.
That was the case.
In the properties, just again, Mr. Bach, in the properties across the street, would there be any availability for drive-throughs there, or?
There is, and I do want to correct that. Mr. Van Tiffelen just pulled up those agreements. The ones across the street would allow a car wash.
Okay.
But again, as I pointed out, there were no homes built adjacent to those when those agreements were entered.
Just to follow up on that car wash and homes, we generally don't have car washes packed up to houses in the township. Most of the time, our car washes are buffered. Usually,
Yeah, none come to mind right now that would be immediately adjacent to a resident.
so I understand the concern in the planning department with stacking a car wash in there, even though there's a lot of space. The houses are tight to the border of that property, and the noise, as efficient as things get more and more efficient, they're still loud, and there's still a lot of activity there. So I can understand where you're coming from with the car
And
wash.
If I could clarify too, and I'll ask Mr. Aloya this question, but they have proposed 2 drive-throughs. They offer the conditions, so
We can't change it.
you can't change what they've offered. They could offer to reduce that here this evening, but what you're unless that happens, what you're voting on is 2.
That's correct. So the petitioner offers the conditions, the board will either, the planning commission will either accept or reject those conditions. The petitioner, if they're inclined to deny those conditions, the petitioner can amend those to through this process or agree to add additional conditions to that.
I guess I got a question of petitioners. So you're wanting an all or nothing answer, basically.
I don't think it's an all or nothing answer. I think with 8 acres and not having the uses in play now, understanding some of the concerns, we would fill up the acreage to the extent we can without packing things in. It's not as simple as a 2-acre corner and it's a singular use. In this case, we're probably 6.5 to 8 acres in total. So with multiple retail uses in the Exhibit B, we wanted to comply with the other 2 other corners that have a similar use. So we weren't going to go against the grain in that regard or add anything differently than the conditional rezones that are already in place with both northwest and northeast corners.
So
We just wanted to follow that guideline.
Just clarification, is it 6.5 or is it 8 acres?
Well, depending on our setbacks, when we do everything, because we're doing a masonry wall, we're doing sidewalks, we're putting in the landscape, retention, so whatever the development is. Right now, we're about 7.5 to 8 acres of just land.
Bare dirt.
Correct. Sorry. Yes.
Thank you.
So without the site plan, that's why I'm generalizing the total acreage concept.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Just one second. Mr. Spatafor, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this would be to Mr. Box. Theoretically, with what the petitioner is offering in Exhibit B, looks like it complies to what's allowed in the commercial zoning for the most part, as far as what's listed there. I want to drill down a little bit more on item 29, a car wash being an accessory to a gas station, and then number 30, like a standalone automatic drive-through car wash. Can the petitioner, with what they're asking for this evening, have a car wash as an accessory if they decide to put in a gas station and then have 2 separate drive-throughs with this petition, or
No,
was it looked at differently?
a drive-through car wash is a drive-through. So if they had a car wash with the gas station and then a separate car wash facility, that would be their 2 drive-throughs.
Okay. So a car wash that, let's say it's a stationary building, you drive a vehicle in there, and then the machines just are there, and the customer would drive out. Is that looked at as a drive-through also?
correct.
Okay. As opposed to your traditional automatic drive-throughs, which oftentimes,
If you're driving your car through it, we're considering it a drive-through.
Okay.
Yes.
all right. I guess to the petitioners now, maybe we're a little early in the game here, but were you, as far as the consideration of a car wash, were you looking at a standalone drive-through automatic, or perhaps as an accessory to a gas station? Or are we too early as far as looking at we'll call it the usable 6 acres or so of land, depending on the assemblage and depending on the users?
I think we're right now early in making that assessment, because who knows in 6 months if the car wash is what we're talking about now, as opposed to a Taco Bell per se, goes on the hard corner and it's not adjacent to the residential. I don't have that answer. We just know it's a commercialized piece, and again, wanting to comply, but we don't have the layout to address where at this time. Compared to, like you said, a Taco Bell going here or a Tim Hortons going here next to a car wash. No.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have anything further.
Thank you, Mr. Spatafor. Mr. Bentley?
Just one question. Would there be any consideration of just having one drive-through regardless of what it's for? Would you reconsider?
That would be a conversation I would have to talk with the full developer on. That I wouldn't be able to answer today. He's out of town, but in the lead up to this, those are the conversations we've had. Just again, being that's an 8-acre piece to make it work as a whole.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Box, I did have a couple just clarification questions. These parcels collectively, they're master planned residential?
R1, that's correct.
Okay. With a conditional rezoning, I suppose it may not really matter what the underlying zoning is, maybe. But I'm curious what the consideration was potentially if you had conversation, if you had a preference between commercial or flex, as most of these uses do seem commercial. I was a little surprised that it was flex with conditions as opposed to commercial with conditions. Did you have any insight on that?
I think the reason that, so yes, I would say the vast majority, if not all of these, would be allowed in a commercial. But by going through the flex ordinance, it makes everything a special land use. So it's actually giving the township a little bit further restriction on what can and can't go there, because they would now, everything would fall under a special land use.
Okay, very good. And I would just make the general comment to the petitioner that in this particular case, if we are looking at something that's master planned, I assume that you guys have that by right. The fact that this is not master planned this way makes me somewhat more thoughtful in what I'm thinking is allowable here. And so I don't know if I'll get any questions yet, but I would just say I might have more questions here than if it was master plan commercial, just because it has been master plan residential, and there are properties around, as Josh had mentioned, that would have had I'll say a reasonable expectation of what this was going to be developed as. So I think we'll get to that after discussion or questions from the comments, but I just wanted to make that comment to you guys.
And I
All
would
right.
like to add, if I could,
Go ahead, Mr. Box.
just to be clear, yes, it's master planned R1 residential. That's why they're going through conditional rezoning. They're asking for something that doesn't match the master plan. So, I think that's the nature of this process. So, I would just say,
So-
just keep that in mind. That
Just to verify from your perspective, if this was not master plan residential, would you expect them to just do a straight commercial rezoning
Yes.
request?
if it was master plan commercial, they would probably just straight rezone it to commercial.
Okay, all right, very good, thank you. With that, I would entertain a motion to open this up to public comment.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Meyerly, supported by Mr. Oliver. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. Public comment is open. If anyone wishes to speak on this comment item, please come up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. You'd have 4 minutes to speak, and just as a reminder, we do take the comments and we bring them back to Mr. Box to determine if there's any that are pertinent to respond to. Ma'am, if you had something, feel free to go over here and please state your name and address.
Thank you. My name is Donna Shook. I live at 48689 Lorenzo Drive. I'm right off of Garfield Road, just south of 22. And since Garfield now goes all the way through to Romeo Plank, there's been quite an increase in traffic, making it difficult for us to get out of our subdivision. So when I saw this proposal, I thought I would share some of that with you guys, because you don't live there. And it's zoned for residential because it's a residential area. I've lived here for 28 years. I was surrounded by farmland, and now I have all these homes that recently were built here in Macomb. We're growing like crazy. So there's over 250 new homes from Hayes to Romeo Plank. My understanding is next year we're gonna do that roundabout at 22 and Romeo Plank. So where's the traffic gonna go? We're gonna be very congested. And so I'm opposed to the proposal, and maybe I'll talk to some of my neighbors to let them know. I didn't realize we're talking 6 to 8 acres. It doesn't look like that much land on the southeast corner. So are we getting rid of some homes?
We'll have Mr. Box address this at the end when we're done with comments, but thank you.
Okay, all right, that's what I wanted to share.
Appreciate it. Anyone else? Seeing none, I would accept a motion to close public portion.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Spatafora.
Support.
Supported by Mr. Meyerly. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by saying nay. That motion carries and the public portion is closed. Mr. Box, did you have anything there that you'd like to comment on?
Yeah, as you see on the screen, outlined in yellow, there appears to be, what is it, 4, 5, 6 homes that I would assume that they would remove as part of a development. That's why they're asking for a rezoning to get rid of the residential to make it a more commercial or flex-used area. So, yes, they would potentially be removing these homes. I guess I would defer to the applicant. They may keep the tenants in these homes until they're ready to fully develop, until they get through the process. But I'm assuming at some point, yes, these would go away.
All right, thank you, Mr. Box. Any questions from the board to the petitioner or to the planning department?
I don't know if you wanted me to address that with the homes that are staying or leaving. If that was,
Yes, feel free to address it.
So I've been in extensive talks with all the homeowners for 2 years leading up to this point that they want to sell, that they want to see the development because, as the lady had stated, the road had expanded, it was getting busier, living on the intersection, seeing the other corners being developed as commercial. So this was not a yesterday conversation. This has been curated over the course of 2 years now. I know the homeowners are here for this as well. So this was, I would say, generated a lot by the homeowners themselves on top of the commercial development for their motivation at the same time.
Very good, thank you.
And I can confirm, we have been in conversation with Mr. Ciotti for quite some time about this, yes.
I guess, and that's the potential issue, if we aren't able to rezone it and it starts to get developed in pieces here, 2 of the 4, and you have a house there, it's really not orderly, and that's why we're asking that this be approved this way.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Mr. Spatafora.
Mr. Box, or maybe this is for Mr. Aloya too, do we know if there's a master thoroughfare plan, realizing that we just opened up Garfield Road, it's fresh pavement, 2 lanes, 1 lane each way, but is there like a future right-of-way where down the line, and it could be a number of years, that both Garfield and 22 Mile Road can be widened and expanded, which you see with a lot of commercial around such intersections?
I haven't seen that. I don't know if Mr. Van Tiffelen has or not.
It does exist, and they're both 120 feet of potential right-of-way in the future. Basically, every mile road and every north-south mile road, in theory, could be similar to 23 Mile, 5 lanes with a center, 2 lanes each direction, center turn lane. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, one thing I guess I'd like to add is we're talking about the conditional zoning tonight. When the site plan comes in for this particular development, and as well as the other corners, the county and the township will look at what lane improvements are going to be necessary for that intersection. There may be center turn lane, right turn lanes, maybe the signal gets changed. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that review that's farther down the line.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spatafora. Anyone else? Hearing no one else, I'd just make a comment to the petitioner that I don't have necessarily a problem with the development. If there is a motion to deny based on what's in front of us today, I would probably go along with it, principally because of some of the objections that the planning department has laid out, and because it's going into an area that's already developed. I think it distinguishes it from the corner across the street. But just making the comment that I like the development in general, I just think it might be a little bit appropriate to make it slightly different, and that if we get to a motion, that would be the principal reason for it. So, with that said, I would entertain any motions on this item. Well, hearing none, I will make a motion then to recommend denial of the conditional rezoning for permanent parcels as noted in our agenda for 0829100001. 0829100002, 0829100003, 082910000919, 0829100021, and 0829100022. And this would be based upon the recommendation from the planning department of potentially reducing this to one drive-through and potentially eliminating the car wash. And also based upon the fact that this corner is already developed and is not currently master planned that way, and might be more appropriate if the petitioner brought back a slightly less intense use.
Before you go to vote, I think the petitioner may want to amend their petition.
Yeah.
If we could, I'll
after they
take
vote.
I'll
Thank
take
you.
a second on it. We can take
After they
discussion
vote,
from there.
right, they want to amend their petition.
Very-
So you can vote on it, and then if they ask for oral amendment,
I will withdraw my motion if we can keep it on the record, and I can refer back to it if you would like, if you want to comment on anything in the meantime.
We'd be willing to amend our request to include just one drive-through, whether it be a traditional drive-through or a car wash.
Okay. All right. With that, I had already rescinded my motion, so that's off the floor. Is there any motion or discussions on this item?
If no further discussion here from the planning commission table, I will go ahead at this time to make a motion to recommend the conditional rezoning at the southeast corner of 22 Mile Road and Garfield Road in section 22. Parcel numbers 0829 100 001 002 003 019 021 and 022 pursuant to the discussion at the table and to what petitioner has offered, and recommendation from our planning department and department reviews.
Motion by Mr. Spatafora. We'll get to discussion in a second, but I got to take a support first if there is one. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mrs. Smith. I'm going to check with Josh first. Mr. Box, did you have any comments on this?
I mean, I think our stance is the same as before. Obviously, we can work with them. They've been very flexible throughout this process. As you see here, they're willing to amend that. If it goes down to one drive-through use and it happens to be a car wash, hopefully they'll continue to be flexible and keep that as close to the hard corner and away from existing residents as possible. But obviously, that's not in the agreement, so we can't guarantee that, but I guess that's all I would have to add.
Okay, very good. Mr. Oliver, do you have discussion on the motion?
He answered it.
Okay. And I would like to confirm one thing. I think we discussed it, but I just want to confirm it. If they were to bring back a car wash, that would go under a special land use, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. And I think the petitioner probably is generally understanding the concern that's up here, so. All right, any other discussion?
I can't stop sneezing.
Hearing none, there's motion on the floor by Mr. Spatafora, supported by Mrs. Smith. If there's no other discussion, I would ask Mr. Bentley to call the roll.
Mr. Spatafora,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Tuckfield,
Yes.
Mr. Marley,
No.
Mr. Bentley, no. Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
All right, that motion passed 4-2. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We appreciate your time. Thank you. All right, that takes us on to item 7B, the first amendment to the conditional rezoning for Big Lakes Lawn Care. This would be on the east side of Romeo Plank, permanent parcels 0817426004 and 0817426005. Mr. Box, if you could take us through this, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. I have a lot of slides here, so bear with me. As you mentioned, this is an amendment to a conditional rezoning agreement that was entered in 2022. The original agreement rezoned the property from R2L to C2 with the intent to be similar in nature to Wade's Nursery, as you see pictured here. That was the previous tenant, with the addition of some work trucks and equipment parked in the rear of the property. Since the 2022 agreement, the applicant has not completed a number of their obligations per the deadlines outlined in the agreement, thus making it void. So they're here to amend that. In addition to those, there have been several activities on site that would have violated the agreement even if it were not void. And so the applicant is here to request an amendment to the agreement to allow the property to feature a zoning of flex use. So they're actually, because even though the other agreement is void, it has to be reverted back. We have to take steps to rezone it back. So they're actually asking to conditionally rezone this from the C2 now to flex with a list of voluntary conditions. So Melissa did a pretty good job here, as I'll run through these slides, of kind of comparing what was asked for previously versus what they're asking
We'll get to you
for
in a second, sir.
currently. The list of conditions as proposed in the amendment, the original, that they used the property for the permitted uses. Again, there was a list of them. And what's revised is they've added to that a number of items, including storing landscaping and construction business vehicles, equipment in inventory. There's bulk material storage, brick paver design installation, landscaping, irrigation, lighting, and then office use. An item that they added would be bulk material storage. They did put some buffer from neighboring properties of where that storage would be and how tall it could be. Another original request on the previous agreement was about perimeter landscaping, and this has been revised with this request to provide a 12-foot wide perimeter along Romeo Plank and adjacent to the north property line that would not encroach into the existing storm sewer easement. The original had the applicant would repair and refurbish the entrance to the property, including the installation of attractive landscaping as needed to revitalize and improve the condition of the aesthetic value of the property. What's requested now is that they may install 2 security gates at 2 entrances. Any security gates that can be seen from Romeo Plank shall be vinyl coated chain link material or better. Original request, it's understood that the 60-foot Romeo Plank right-of-way will be dedicated from the property, as well as they allowed the township to move the former township hall. Those have been removed because those have actually happened at this point. Items that they've added, that they may install security fencing in locations and manner as depicted and described on the amended plan. They may use the 3 buildings currently on site as cold storage directly related to the business operations as depicted. In the event necessary, the applicant will exercise proper dust control on property. Applicant may use the farmhouse located on the property as office space for the business operations and tenant uses as set forth above. Any alterations, additions, or renovations to the existing farmhouse shall be subject to township code requirements and site plan review, provided, however, such alterations, additions, or renovations shall not require any amendment to this conditional rezoning agreement or an amended plan. Again, on the original, they would provide the paved driveway approach as well as a pad for an ADA parking spaces, and they would do that within 18 months of the rezoning effective date. The paved driveway approach would be installed no later than November 30th of 2022. Obviously, they've missed those deadlines. What they're proposing now is here, again, still looking to create an ADA compliant parking spot. No requirement for creation of an ADA compliant parking spot for the storage buildings or other structure. These improvements shall be installed within 12 months of the rezoning effective date. Originally, they had asked for the applicant shall commence installation of an 8-foot wide concrete pathway along the entire Romeo Plank frontage of the site within 18 months of the effective date. They're essentially asking to do the same thing, but within 12 months this time. The applicant shall submit a site plan and engineering plans for approval by the township before it commences installation of any permanent or temporary improvement on the property, including but not limited to paving, signage, the gate or bin blocks for storage of landscaping materials. That was the original request, and they've added to it that they shall apply for and submit a site plan on or before January 1st, 2024, and engineering plans shall be submitted no later than 30 days after approval of the site plan. Applicant shall obtain all permits required from state, federal, and local agencies. They have also added that any and all tenants located on site will be obligated to obtain any and all required business permits or licenses, including but not limited to the certificate of zoning compliance. They did originally request the C2 and that they will meet all the standard ordinance language. That's changed slightly, as you see here. And then they added the applicant represents and confirms that the property shall not be used or developed in a manner inconsistent with the rezoning conditions set forth in this amendment or any other terms and conditions of this amendment. So they do have a concept plan that was provided, that was in your packet as well, showing the way that they would intend to develop this property as part of this request. So staff looked at this, assessing had no objections from their standpoint. Fire just requested that they follow and comply with IFC 2015. Public Works had no comments. So engineering and planning had several, and I'll go through those here. If you have their agreement in the packet, paragraph 1B of the rezoning conditions could be considered if the bulk material storage is placed in bins and indicated as such on the agreement and the concept plan. Legal descriptions, there were some issues with the plan attached to the conditional rezoning agreement shall be clearly named concept plan, not site plan. Paragraph 1C of the rezoning conditions indicate that landscaping along the perimeter will not encroach into the existing storm sewer easement at the north end of the site. However, the landscaping is clearly shown within the easement on the concept plan, and the information conflicts. Again, there was an issue with the legal description. The legal descriptions for both parcels indicate an exception of 64 feet of right-of-way. However, this shall be revised to 60 feet to be consistent with the county's master plan. The concept plan contains several miscellaneous construction notes and details that are more appropriate for an engineering plan. The notes at the driveway approaches related to the acceleration, deceleration, tapers are more appropriate for an engineering plan. And the notes on the concept plan regarding gravel expansion for vehicle access around the property shall be removed, as this item is not listed as a condition within the agreement. So planning staff's review of this, again, there's a few here. I'll go through them. Rezoning condition 1A states the property will be used for commercial business purposes of landscaping and light construction and deck paver installation. Business operations ancillary to landscaping limited to sub-items I through VII. So staff is not in support of allowing purposes of specifically the light construction or deck installation. Rezoning condition 1AI states that the storage of construction business vehicles would be permitted. Staff are not in support of this use. Again, the term construction can be conveyed in a lot of ways, and we're not comfortable with that. Rezoning condition 1AI indicates that there'll be sales on site to sufficiently serve the public. ADA spaces should be provided. They're only showing one at the building, which would be an office building. But if you're going to have the public on site, we feel that an ADA space should be provided. Rezoning condition 1B refers to bulk material storage. There's no clarification as to whether the material will be stored in any containers or bins. Staff's not in support of this, as especially being unenclosed, as much of it's in the floodplain. Condition 1H states that alterations, additions, or renovations of the existing farmhouse shall be subject to township building code requirements in site plan review. It's unclear what sections of the ordinance are referred to. In addition, staff are not in support of the statement that alterations, additions, or renovations shall not require any amendment to the conditional rezoning agreement or amended plan. 1K does not mention the certificate of occupancy process. Rezoning condition 1L allows the property to be used for other uses in the flex use zoning district in the event the applicant does not want to use the property for those uses as listed in the proposed agreement. This condition does not mention the ordinance requirements that all uses in the flex zoning district are to be treated as special land uses and therefore subject to the applicable special land use standards. A provision of the agreement entitled Use and Development of the Property appears to allow all uses within the flex zoning district. A provision of the agreement entitled Zoning Expiration describes the effective time period. However, the proposed agreement and the repercussions of the conditions of the agreement are not being met. However, the conditions also contain specific deadlines and timeframes, but there's no description of repercussions, if any, are to occur if those deadlines or timeframes are not met. Looking at the plan, similar to the engineering comment, we would like the term site plan removed and refer to it as a concept plan. The landscape buffer has been increased from 8 feet to 12 feet along the north property line in Romeo Plank. However, it appears that the buffer has been completely removed along the south property line, and staff suggests the screening fence and details be removed from the concept plan as they are not specifically referred to within the agreement. They're more appropriate for the site plan process. Notes do show that much of the rear of the site is being used for bulk storage for landscape materials, construction equipment. It appears that they will be stored openly. Staff's not in support of this bulk material storage being unenclosed, again, as the area is within the floodplain. A landscape plan with detailed planting notes, references to signage, plant types, other information is provided. Staff suggests the sheet be removed and considered as part of the site plan. In addition, several notes related to landscaping along the property's frontage refer to a landscape plan. If the landscape plan is removed, these notes would need to be updated accordingly. So it was quite a list. So that being said, staff is not in support at this time of the proposed amendment. There's a lot of ambiguous language and too many conditions that seem to stray from what was initially promised of Wade's Nursery versus what we're seeing out there today.
All right, thank you, Mr. Box, appreciate it. With that said, if the applicant is in the audience and would like to speak, please come ahead to the podium over here, state your name and address for the record, and give any comments you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Box. Hi, everybody. I hope we can get this process pushed forward today. I saw y'all here last time I was here, and as you recall, I recall you guys were awesome to deal with. Can you hear me okay?
We'll need your name and address.
My name's Chester Buczynski, 51194 Romeo Plank. So this has taken longer than any of us wanted, and it's been more complex, and I've gotten more tangled up in what's a concept plan versus site plan, and when can you pour concrete versus when can you put in a fence, and trust me, I hate the black fence too. For security reasons, we need a fence there, but I'm not allowed to put a fence there until I get all this approved.
If you could make sure that, just so you know, for protocol, when you're addressing, if you can make sure you address us, they'll have a chance to speak, but we gotta make sure everyone addresses the board.
Great, yep. So, long story short, my goal today is to get the ball pushed forward, to come to a mutual understanding of what is gonna work there, and to get to work, because we've been chomping at the bit for, it's just taken longer than I would have liked. And a couple more quick comments. Based on what was just read, Macomb Township also broke their side of the agreement, which was to remove those buildings within 6 months of closing, which they did not do. It took over a year. So I didn't know if that was going to come up or not, but that's my side of it too, is that there was a lot that was supposed to be done by them that wasn't. And so we both reneged on part of that deal. I wish it had gone smoother. We also did not request to switch to Flex, so I don't know what the nuance is behind that. As a layman, I'm not a property developer. I read C2, I read Flex. I didn't suggest that or ask for that. So it was not me that submitted a request to change this to Flex zoning. I was happy with the original conditions, it just took me too long. And I'm still happy with the original conditions largely. Point 3, there were notes in there that we have removed the expectation to put a landscaping buffer and instead install security gates. That's a typo or an error somewhere, because you then showed the landscape plan. We're gonna landscape the dickens out of that place. We're landscapers. I just need a green light to get some of this to go ahead and do it. So the landscaping is still in the plan, or should be, and if it's not, we've gotta go back to the drawing board on that portion. Other than that, maybe we can go through them one by one and I can give you my feedback. But largely, I want to put in a security fence, rip down that crap, landscape it, pour 150 grand worth of concrete, and have it done in 25. And I've already got most of the contractors lined up to do it, and I'm dying to do it. I think we just have a few little nuances here we got to work through. Thank you.
You're welcome. You mentioned you wanted to go through some of them. Was there something else that you wanted to present, or or is that all that you had for us?
Like, kind of have a response to some of the items that they found to be unfavorable, or some of their notes on them, so I could just keep going if you'd like.
Go ahead.
Cool. Item 1, this is from the planning staff regarding the proposed agreement. I state that the agreement will be used for commercial business purposes of landscaping. Staff are not in support of light construction and deck installation business. I'm not trying to expand my use whatsoever. I'm trying to get this language to match the current use. We're not out there with residential trusses and concrete mixers and stuff, but we do put in the occasional deck for a client. We do knock out and replace concrete curbing for our commercial clients. And I want what we're doing to be congruent with what's listed on there. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, staff are not in support of storage of construction business vehicles. Maybe we got to get more granular there, but to me, that's pickup trucks and trailers, which is the same as landscaping vehicles, right? I'm not proposing cranes or like massive civil engineering equipment, but I'm talking about pickup trucks and trailers and the stuff we use every day to landscape. ADA spaces, only one building is open to the public, therefore I only think we need one ADA space. That was from the original agreement too. That was their original request, was one ADA compliant space. Happy to do it. I already built a wheelchair ramp to get into our, into that house there, because that will be open to the public one day, hopefully. Bulk material storage, happy to put it in bins. I'll bin it all in. I want it to be clean and neat and organized just as much as you guys do, and I'm also hoping that 100-year flood doesn't come, especially since they widened the drain under 23 Mile. So I don't even think this is a floodplain any longer. This is where Clinton River passes under 23. They did a massive project and opened that up. So don't even know if it's a floodplain anymore. I didn't need flood insurance when I went through the whole process of insuring this place. This one's confusing. Alterations, additions, renovations of the farmhouse. I have none proposed. So we can ex-nay that. I'm not trying to go in there and, massively alter this house without getting the green light from you guys. I have no plans. I'm going to skip ahead here. Flex, that was proposed by the city or the municipality here. I don't know what the reason for it is, but I'm happy to go with it. Landscape buffer removed along the south property line in lieu of a masonry wall. That's why that's there. There's a 6-foot masonry wall along the entire south property line until it's more than halfway off of Romeo Plank to where the adjoining property doesn't have anything back there either. It's a field of grass on both sides with a landscape buffer down the middle. So the masonry wall ends, we're heading west to east here, and at that point at the easterly end, it turns to a stand of really tall pine trees. If I go to landscape on the north side of those, it's all gonna die anyway because it's competing with 30-foot tall white spruce. That was also discussed in the prior arrangement. You guys were gonna let me not landscape that side. It's not visible from the road, it's not visible from the adjoining property, and it's next to a masonry wall. So if it's a sticking point, I'll do it. I hope to not have to. And beyond that, I wish I'd hired somebody else to do the site plan, because we took everything, all the edits that you guys requested that were detailed here, and sent it along to them the day we got it, and we've still been dragging. So if I could go back in time, that's the one thing I would have done differently. But other than that, I apologize it's taken so long, and I'm here for the questions.
All right, any questions from the board to the applicant? Go ahead, Mr. Spatafor.
Mr. Bazitsky, from the time you received the original conditional rezoning until now, did you ever take the time to come to the township and maybe meet with the planning department or the engineering department, perhaps to get their input when, time was passing and you weren't able to get a lot of these conditions in, to maybe first discuss that with them? Because normally with such information that we got, we don't get this many red flag items that we're asked to review tonight. Usually that's why we have our departments that vet those things and can thoroughly work with you to come to maybe an agreement or understanding to answer your questions, and for them to give their input to you as far as why what was promised a couple of years ago has not been done.
Sure, absolutely. So in preparation, post receiving this and in preparation for tonight's meeting, we requested a meeting and was not granted.
Well, I'm talking, you know, long
Oh, way
before
before.
that
Sure.
submitted, because, you know, it just appears, at least speaking for myself, coming before it now, with these many red flag concerns on the part, particularly with the engineering department and the planning department, that it's really not in a condition for us to properly here on the planning commission to, you know, give you some type of positive relief that you're really looking for with what you need to do, especially given a 2-year history where perhaps because of economic conditions, things weren't done.
Sure, yeah. You guys have been great to deal with, and I take 100% accountability for it not being done on time and the conditions not being met, and it wasn't my intention. And I'm not here tonight to drag along or make excuses. If I could, again, I hired an attorney, I hired an engineer, I hired through some other people at this, and I thought, hey, if I put the attorney and the engineer and the city together, they'll kind of get me to a point where I can break ground and do the thing. And that was naivete on my part. So there were meetings had, there was conversation had, but certainly not as proactively from my spot as I would have liked looking back in time. And so I'm here tonight not to look at that, but to go, hey, I guess I'm going to spearhead this thing now, despite the fact that I had an attorney negotiating on my behalf and all this stuff. It just never got anywhere.
Do you think, and you're the final call on this, Mr. Buzinski, but do you think it might be in your best interest perhaps to reconsider before going forward with the planning commission to consider this tonight, maybe to withdraw it and maybe spend some time talking more to the planning department and to the engineering department to hear their concerns, to see if they can work with you, since apparently you've made a business decision to decide to go on this by yourself or go it alone?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I've still retained, you know, people to advise me, but I've just found that nothing happens if I'm not the one out on point doing it. You know, the last guy had the lawyers here. Well, it's me here tonight to talk with you, right? Prior folks had the representative here. So I'm basically going to do whatever it takes. And I'm very confident that if we just get the green light on this stuff, it can be done in 25. If you're suggesting that I pull this back and go back to the negotiating table before I present it, I'm happy to. The majority of these, though, I agree with. The majority of their changes I agree with.
But see, a lot of what is recommended, they can't support, and engineering, I counted at least 9 conditions where they can't even make a recommendation until you perhaps meet with them, address them, and maybe perhaps at the engineering department at the counter, they can assist you with that, with what you need. They have a concern, they can express to you, you can tell them what you can do and implement that. So if we see a concept plan, you know, that addresses properly what I think our engineering department and our planning department has looked to, consistent with our ordinances, we can perhaps make a more thorough review and a, you know, positive and confident recommendation for you.
Sure. I'm happy to do that. I'll tell you now, looking at the notes from engineering, 100% of them I comply with. Every single item on this line from this section from engineering, I comply with. And I forwarded this over to the gentleman who generated the original site plan and requested him. I said, make all changes as requested. That was maybe 2 weeks ago when I got this. So I don't contend with any of that section. But again, if you'd prefer me to go back to the drawing board, I'm happy to.
Well, it's your final call. I'm not sure there's a exact meeting of the minds as far as
Right.
what we're being asked to do, what we see here and what you are proposing for us.
Right. There's two major sticking points then, if I could just maybe get some clarity on the language tonight. And then I will happily go back to the drawing board and present this in a more...
I do want to check with our legal counsel one thing. Mr. Loya, with regards to this, and obviously Mr. Spatafor is indicating some of the concerns with a number of items here. I'm not sure that I fully agree with him as far as tabling it or bringing it back. And I guess I would just ask, is it the Planning Commission's purview whether to vote on this tonight? Is it only our purview, or is there outside requests that could make it so that we would not vote on it this evening?
So it's in front of you tonight because the petitioner has asked for a conditional rezoning amendment, and it follows this. He had a conditional rezoning agreement it expired. He didn't even come close to complying. He received notices from the township that he was in violation. There have been several meetings. So now he's coming forward with an amendment. It's the same consideration. It's offered conditions because he's changed the original conditional rezoning. He wants to offer new conditions that this planning commission can consider in its discretion. It can reject them. It can deny them. And today's not the day to negotiate. You're not going to sit here and say, yes, you can do this. No, you can do that. You're either going to accept them or reject them. So if Mr. Bazinski wants to withdraw his application at this time and resubmit after meeting with the township once again, because there have been several meetings, to discuss the issues that we've raised several times, I think we would do that. Of course, we want the site in compliance. Of course, we want to work through this issue. It's been very difficult. So it's up to Mr. Bazinski now if he wants to withdraw it tonight and resubmit once there's maybe a better understanding of what needs to be done. That would maybe be advisable. If not, he can go through and the planning commission can decide what he wants to do.
So here would be my concern. Obviously, this has been in the process for quite some time, and as you indicated, we have gone past the deadlines for the original conditional rezoning.
That's correct.
My opinion, and I am 1/6 of the board here this evening,
Sure.
is that I would prefer to vote on this one way or the other this evening. And so my question is there a scenario where we would be forced to not vote on it this evening, or can the board decide to vote on it regardless?
The board has a request before it and it can choose to vote on it at this time.
Okay, very good. And I didn't want to interrupt you, Mr. Spatafor. I just want to make sure that we were all on the same page. And for myself, I think this item has been on for a long time, and while there are a considerable number of issues potentially being raised here, I feel it's our purview or our necessity to look at this and vote on it this evening. That's just my opinion, as again, 1/6 of the board this evening. So I just want to make sure I brought that up. Did you have any other, I know I kind of interrupted you in the middle of there, Mr. Spatafor. But do you have any other questions?
I have no further questions or comments.
Okay, very good. Is there any other members who have?
Just a question on
Mr. Oliver.
to the floor, to the chair. Your proposal then is to vote on it tonight?
Yes, obviously, we still have more of the process this evening. We have public comment and other things, but
Sure.
And I think that if there was a request to not vote on it tonight, we'd have to vote on it as a board, but my recommendation would be to continue with it. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Go ahead, Mrs. Smith.
Is this the first time you saw all the red flags that we have on this tonight, or you knew about that when you came here?
No, I knew about that and requested an in-person meeting with the members of the planning commission. Or, I'm sorry, I'm misusing that term. I wanted to meet with Jim,
Yeah,
Josh,
understood.
council, and it never happened.
And you met with them before, correct?
Numerous times.
Okay.
And based on my numerous meetings leading up to this, we were kind of alarmed when I got this. To comment on Mr. Aloya's,
You were alarmed when you
I was
got this?
alarmed at, I was also alarmed at the number of changes here. When our original agreement lapsed and we wanted to obviously get a new one in place, the only changes we wanted were an extension of dates. I didn't ask to change to flex. I didn't ask for any of these changes. All I wanted to do was push the dates down the road. I already have a signed agreement and a deposit in place with a concrete contractor,
Well,
which is
the changes are so it's compliant.
Sure, yeah. I don't understand what some of them are for, but I'm willing to, that's why I'm here tonight, is to move the process forward.
And just like Josh said, I'm only one person on the board, but as a board member, to see that, I'm struggling with that.
Sure.
I just have a question, Josh. Where did this flex come from? He's denying that he even asked for it.
So the underlying zoning of the property was R2L, and it was rezoned to C2 as part of the first agreement. Even though the agreement itself has lapsed, the underlying zoning is now been changed to C2 until the township takes action to revert it back to R2L. So now that he wants to make an amendment to C2, he has to conditionally rezone that. You can't conditionally rezone from C2 to C2. It has to be a different district. So flex was the only option that allowed these same things. That was something that his attorney came up with, not the township. But it's the right decision. It's the only way to really do it.
So his attorney came up with this flex.
That's correct.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I get.
Are you certain about that, Josh?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, because I was made to believe that.
Just 1 second. Go ahead,
Sure.
Mr. Oliver.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, you're saying you're out of the loop, but your own attorney is recommending things to our planning department that it don't sound like you're in step with.
Right, well, that's why I asked Josh how sure he was of that, because she came to me and said the same thing. And she's from Bodmin. I mean, it's a pretty reputable firm, right? I retained great counsel here. I'm an attorney who claims to have someone from her firm or some close advisor of hers has worked with the township before. So I tried to pick a good attorney, right? And she told me that her flex was not her idea. And I know that for a fact. I don't think she'd have any reason to lie to me about her intentions.
I would just comment that I've sat on this planning commission for a number of years. I've worked with Josh and Jim, well, Jim longer than Josh because he's been here longer, for a number of years, and I have never, ever heard them misstating something that they put into an application and not the petitioner. So just for myself, I would take exception to that on behalf of the planning staff and say that I don't think that unless you have specific evidence that you would like to put forward, I personally find that, well, ludicrous, to be honest.
If I could, Mr. Tuckfield.
Go ahead,
so,
Mr. Box.
Again, I believe that came from his attorney. I don't want to say 100% because I don't recall exactly, but regardless, the only other option was flex. You can't rezone from C2, conditionally rezone from C2 also to C2. You have to change the district when you're doing a conditional rezoning. And you also cannot, for example, conditionally rezone from a C2 to ag and ask to do something that doesn't belong in ag. The category you're rezoning to has to permit the uses that you're providing. So the only other category that was an option was flex. So regardless of whoever came up with it, that's the only viable solution without reverting back to the R2L and starting the whole process over.
Mr. Box, there was also, I believe, some other insinuations that other elements of this were inserted by people other than the applicant or his representative. Would you see any opening or potential truth in that?
This process is they provide conditions. There has been some back and forth of our opinions of those conditions, and his attorney has made some revisions. We've met with him, as he indicated, a number of times. I don't think many, if any, of our conditions that, or our concerns that you're seeing this evening are new. They've been similar conditions or concerns the entire time. Jim, I don't know if you wanted to add.
Yeah, I guess with conditional rezoning, we as staff have to be careful. Ultimately, it's the petitioner's offer to the township. So we express our concern, what we can and cannot support. We can, offer suggestions, but ultimately it is up to the petitioner and their professionals to make the final call and revise the document and submit it to the township for planning commission, ultimately the township board to consider. That's really what happens on all these, and that's what happened here. There was a lot more back and forth on this one than there would normally be, but we essentially got to a point where they wanted to be on this agenda. We got the final version that after having several meetings, we have a formal document to review. That's where the list of comments came from, was from our final formal review of their submittal. And I don't know how we got to that point, but that was their interpretation of our discussion. Obviously, we did not agree with their interpretation.
But in this case, they submitted the conditional agreement.
It is their offer to the township. The conditions are offered.
And Mr. Loya, just because obviously we have a responsibility here with this, I know you generally are involved with these types of processes. Would your observation or would your comments be similar to those Mr. Box and Mr. Van Tiffelen have made?
Yes, I've participated in some of those meetings. Mr. Candela has participated in some of those meetings, and I know that his attorney has had several discussions with Mr. Candela and reviewed the agreement with him a few times. I know that she edited it and significantly contributed to the version and submitted it that you have before you. I also know that the complaint regarding his engineer has been there 6 months. He's continued to say the same thing, so it's been part of the process.
Okay. All right, any other questions from the board? Hearing none, I would open up the floor for a motion to open public comment.
I'll make that motion.
Mrs. Smith,
Support.
support by Mr. Meyerly. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. We'll get to you, but I'm gonna go to public comment first. We'll just get that done, and then you'll get a chance after they're done.
Sure, appreciate it.
No problem. If there's anyone from the public who would like to speak on this regard or on this comment, please come up to the podium. And you'll have 4 minutes, ma'am, or anyone else who talks. And just bear in mind, if there's any questions, we collect them to the end, and if they're pertinent, we have Mr. Box address them.
Catherine Hadger, 17986 Redwood Drive, Maple Villa. You guys with me? I would like to know the noise from the trucks in and out of there, the tandem trucks, the piggybacks, whatever you call them, are constant. Sometimes 7:30 in the morning when it first started, 8 o'clock. The dust from it is all over our houses, and we have to breathe that air too. I'm trying to think. There's a machine, I don't know what you call it, maybe you can help me out, buddy. The one that shoots the dirt.
Topsoil screener.
The screener, it's got an arc and it shoots that dirt. It's so noisy. You can hear it in the house with your doors shut. Then we've got, let's see, what have I got? Have you visited that area at all, the board members? And looked at our Maple Villa subdivision that's directly across? Well, I believe it was, gosh, was it January of 22 or 23 when the huge explosion at 4 o'clock in the morning blew up? It was Wade's old little shack where we paid for our items and that. There was a boat in there and a pickup truck. I have pictures of it. It shook one of the neighbors' houses behind me on Cottonwood. And that soot from the fires damaged 4 houses along there, one particularly. And I don't know if they contacted you for a reimbursement with insurance claims or what, but it was a mess. And then we had, let me think here. I lost my place. Oh, the township, correct me, didn't you have that zoned as an R1 or R2 for homes at one time before you sold it to Mr. Buczynski? There was a for sale sign out in that lot when Wade moved out.
I just want to confirm, we're writing down the questions, and if there's any that Mr. Box should answer at the end, we'll answer at the end. We're not ignoring you, we're just following our process, so you know.
Okay. Well, that's what I wanted to know, like, what was the reason for changing the zoning from the R1 or R2 to commercial? And that's about all. I just wanted to know some of these things here because the damage is there, and the windows of the houses are filthy from the dust, but it's constant. It's the noise, though. And I wondered, do you have an ordinance that says certain types of trucks can be applied to that? I understand that it's a landscaping business and you use several types. But when those tandems come through there, I mean, and they're damaging the road, it's terrible. So I'm just hoping something can be resolved by that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead, sir.
My name is Craig, 51730 Romeo Plank. On the 2 properties north of Big Lakes. So I guess my question was, you rolled through what was going to be instituted on the north side. So there's a fence that separates the properties. So I'd like to know, is there concrete or what was going to be put in there? My next question is, does the board come up with a decision, or does it have to, or is anyone from the property owners involved in this, or is it just the board that's going to make the conclusion, like, yes, we're gonna move forward, or no, we're not, or can anyone say yay or nay, is a property owner, moving forward with the rezoning? Let's see, what else? Is the property gonna be changed in any way where it could cause flooding? Could it be built up? Because clearly I'm right next door. And that area does flood. We had flooding, I think it was January of this year, significant. So it is a floodplain, without a doubt. That hasn't changed. That's all I have. Will I get answers to these questions? And is there another meeting scheduled that we can attend to follow up on this?
Just briefly, we will address the questions at the end. There are sometimes questions that are not pertinent, and so sometimes there are some that don't get answered, but generally, yes. I believe that anything we were to recommend this evening, Mr. Box, correct me if I'm wrong, would go before the Board of Trustees at their next regularly scheduled meeting. This board is a recommending body when it comes to rezoning, so we would vote on a recommendation, and then the board is who actually acts on it.
One other quick question, property values. How does this impact myself and anyone else across the street or further down Romeo Plank? That's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one, I would bring it back to the board for a motion to close the public portion.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Spatafora.
And I'll support.
Supported by Mr. Meyerly. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. That motion carries, and our public portion is closed. Mr. Box, did you want to address any of these?
Sure. Before I answer the questions, I also want to point out there was another letter on your desk this evening. I believe it says Stella Ross, that I believe is with regards to this item as well. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that that was at your desk this evening. I will do my best to answer these questions. So the dust in the discussion about the topsoil screener, I think that's one of our concerns. The uses that he's suggesting or offering that we don't feel is the best fit there. It's similar to, I guess I was not aware that there was an explosion. I knew the building had burned down. But again, that was, my understanding was that was a sublease to that building and a different tenant was using it. Again, a use that we're not in favor of. That's what we're trying to wrangle in here. A development of a property that is surrounded by a lot of residential folks that fits the neighborhood. With regards to noise, the township does have a noise ordinance, but we do not control the noise on the roadway itself. However, some of these large haulers, I think, have to do with hauling in dirt and running them through the screener, which again is a use that we would have some concerns with. So that's what we're trying to address here. And she is correct. The original zoning was R2L when the township sold the property. That's what it was when he bought it, and he conditionally rezoned it to C2 originally. That's how we started this process of where we're at. The gentleman's question about what's going to be between the property, what is currently being proposed is a landscape buffer of 12 feet. It would not be directly on the property line because there's a utility easement right on the property line, so it would actually be a little bit south of that. But a 12-foot green belt or a landscaped buffer is what is being proposed. So with regards to the questions, the Planning Commission this evening will be, if you choose to vote on this item, make a recommendation to the Township Board. The Township Board makes the final approval, and assuming that a vote one way or the other is held this evening, that next available Township Board meeting is next Tuesday. I know it's typically Wednesday, it's Tuesday next week because of the holiday, I believe. With regards to flooding, yes, there are concerns with what's going into the floodplain. That's why we have concerns with the material storage, especially our concern is to keep them in bins, so if it does flood, the stuff doesn't float down the river. But just being in the floodplain, that takes up space in the floodplain, which could affect neighboring properties. That's something that would be ironed out once they go through engineering, which is a later phase of this process. And then again, with regards to property values, I'm not an expert in that, but again, what we're trying to do here is limit what can and cannot be done on this property to minimize any impacts that there may be to property values.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Box. And by my notes, I believe that covered pretty much everything that I had written down there that I think we could answer this evening. You had a question before we went to public comment.
I did. I just had a comment. I wanted to be clear. I think maybe I owe you two an apology. I did not intend to call in their integrity into question here by saying it wasn't me who requested flex, those types of comments. Those two have been phenomenal to work with. They've been clear, they've been proactive and communicative, and I ultimately take full responsibility for things not happening on time. So again, I don't call their integrity into question whatsoever. They've been phenomenal to work with, as has Mr. Loya and Jeff from your firm. One other thought, dust control, noise, all those types of things, I think are all gonna be cut down once we do what we're proposing here, which is pave the approaches, right? That'll cut down on noise. That'll massively cut down on dust. Sod the entire front. Right now, anytime a car goes around there and runs on the shoulder, it's kicking up dirt. There's people illegally using that triangular dirt lot that we don't even know who it is, right? People always getting pulled over in there. So dust and noise will be cut down dramatically once we just concrete this thing, we sod it, we put a big wall of pine trees up and some flowers. I mean, we're excited. It's gonna look good.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Oliver.
I make a motion, in lieu of what's taking place tonight with all the red flags that we all see, from the beginning, nothing was done on this project, practically zero, what we intended to start with. And I feel that the township and the planning department worked very hard on the initial takeoff of this piece of property. It was a tricky piece of property. We all knew that. But I feel our planning department is practically bent over backwards. And then to get no response from the owner there is a little bit disappointing. The simple thing of even cleaning the fence off, cleaning up the blowing plastic, would at least made that look a little bit better. So in lieu of that, my recommendation is to deny this proposal.
All right, motion by Mr. Oliver,
I'll support that.
supported by Mrs. Smith. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, Mr. Bentley, please call the roll.
I will. Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
Yes to deny.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Tuckfield?
Yes.
Mr. Marley?
Yes to deny.
Mr. Spatafora?
Yes.
And Mr. Bentley, yes.
All right, that motion passes 6-0. Thank you for coming in, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you all.
All right. That moves us on to item 8, which is public comments on non-agenda items. If there's anyone in the audience this evening who wishes to speak on this request, look at me going into autopilot mode here, who wishes to speak on none of the requests, please come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record and give any comments you might have. Seeing none, I'm going to move us on to commissioner comments. Is there any members of the board who would like to say anything this evening?
Happy Thanksgiving to the Planning Commission and everyone here in the room tonight.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Spatafora. Anyone else? I just mentioned, I don't know that we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I think I had put it on the record. Mr. Hardy was not able to make it this evening. I believe Mr. Hardy did notify us properly. I think on our end, there was a couple of us who hadn't written it down on the correct date. So I just want to put it out there that he did his job correctly, and I'm glad we were able to get through it. But I want to make sure there wasn't any confusion on that fact. All right, that moves us on to the Macomb Township Board of Trustees Liaison, and in honor of Mr. Hardy, Mr. Charles Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Tuckfield. A quick couple things. We hired a inspector. That was one of the things. We also hired a firefighter, And the last thing is that our trustee Nancy Nevers has retired after 20 years of service. And that's about it.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Moves us on to the ZBA liaison update, which is myself. I don't believe we've had a ZBA since our last meeting. I had to think about it since we only had our last meeting last week, so nothing new to report since last week. Takes us to the planning department items. Mr. Box, anything from you this evening?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, as I mentioned, the Board of Trustees meeting next week is on a Tuesday instead of a normal Wednesday due to the holiday. The same goes with our next meeting for Planning Commission is Monday, December 2nd. It's not a Tuesday, it's a Monday. Again, because the board meeting that week is being slid back to Tuesday. So we had to accommodate and move back to Monday. Similar to us having a meeting 2 weeks in a row, the holidays can sometimes move these dates around. So I just want to make sure everyone is aware our next meeting is Monday, December 2nd. That's it.
Very good. And Mr. Box, do we have anything on the agenda for that meeting?
I don't know off the top of my head. I believe we do, but I'm not 100% certain on that. I'm pretty sure we do.
Okay, very good. Mr. Spatafor, you had something?
Well, I was going to say, since the planning commission meeting is going to be moved to December 2nd, unfortunately, I will be out of town, so even at this time, I'll go ahead and just request to respectfully be excused for that night.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Spatafor. Mr. Lloyd, do you have anything for us this evening?
Nothing.
Okay, very good. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Meyerly.
Support.
Supported by Mr. Spatafora. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. At 8:17, we stand adjourned.